This is the Digital Trust Podcast. In every episode, we strive to bring support to those of you who serve on the front lines and in the trenches of data and technology. We endeavor to bring understanding to the under-resourced and underappreciated, help remove your stress, and provide relief to your pain. Welcome to the Digital Trust Podcast. Sit down with us as we give you hard-hitting advisory conversations to help you build digital trust with your stakeholders and clients, and actionable takeaways to help you become a digitally trustworthy organization.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Digital Trust Podcast. And we are blessed to have with us again Michelle Dennedy from the San Francisco Bay Area. And welcome once again, Michelle, to the show.
Thank you.
Awesome. So we've covered a lot in this series so far, and unfortunately, this is our final episode here in this series. But we are going to start, I think, by getting into something referred to as the data lifecycle, which has branches into privacy, data governance, and cybersecurity. Sometimes at the end of this, data can become a toxic asset and can become a liability. Can you talk us through that and maybe how we should see it and what we can do to effectively manage the data lifecycle?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, again, if you think about all of this in the context of a system, oftentimes when you're thinking about the data lifecycle, you're thinking about a product that you're building. This is when we're going to collect from a customer. This is how we're going to use it. And then hopefully you're thinking about what to do with it after its useful purpose has been fulfilled, really. And so oftentimes that's like the tight view of the data lifecycle from cradle to grave. We don't think about digging those graves because we're so excited about the new baby, the new data, the new product. Oftentimes where the toxic liability happens can be at the very end of life when you say, well, I have a data retention plan that says, store commercial documents for 7 years, for example, but you don't have a modality for getting rid of anything. And this is what I call the rat poop baby syndrome. So the rat poop baby syndrome is, if you've ever seen the show Hoarders, and there's like a person who was like, I love these little baby dolls. I collect these baby dolls. I've collected them my whole life. I can't stop collecting them. My God, these baby dolls. And then suddenly, instead of having this beautiful, curated, well-loved collection, there's rat poop covered junk sitting everywhere. The toxic liability of your data center happens when you create the rat poop baby archives, because you've had a million different marketing campaigns, you've had a million different EOL products, you've had employees that have come and gone years and years and years ago, and you're just storing data because it might be useful one day, or I might need it for AI, or I might. It's not fitting purpose. It's not fitting minimization. So you're already out of bounds with your legal requirements. But most importantly, you're not having that healthy, hygienic, well-curated data lifecycle that we think of beyond your organization as the global data supply chain. So sometimes you're buying sources of data, sometimes you're sharing sources of data with third parties. So if your part of the world for the lifecycle is dented or bruised, you're not creating a wholesome ingredient in the overall data lifecycle. And the reverse is true. When you really do curate your data, you know exactly where those little baby dolls are. When you watch the Antique Roadshow and you see that they're now worth 10 times their price, well, you can sell them for 10x. And the same is true for data, where it's well-purposed, it's connected to people, you're engaged, your users trust you to share with third parties, they've given you permission to do so. Now you're starting to create mutual value across the data lifecycle and the global data supply chain.
And I didn't really plan to go into this, Michelle, but I'm sure you have insight into this, is all of the different aspects of the data lifecycle right from the beginning. So when data is created, when it's duplicated, when it's stored, when it's communicated, right, transferred. And that makes me think about data discovery and data classification.
Yes.
From a
beautiful data dictionary.
Exactly. So from a cybersecurity perspective, we're looking for the crown jewels. What is your most sensitive, most valuable, most precious information that you would never want to get into the wrong hands, right? How involved do you get in that kind of stage of the game from a data governance or a privacy perspective, and how should that look in a healthy situation?
This is where this kind of unified front, where you have different specialties, but you have the same business goal, because exactly as you say, you want that data, the CIA trifecta of security, right? Is you also want it to be available. So you want high integrity data. So we're thinking about, what is integrity? Integrity says that I'm allowed to use it, I'm allowed to have it. It matches, or it's indicative of a predictor that I want to mark with that data point. I can now understand what this asset is. And I can understand too, maybe I need to atomize it. So from a security perspective, you might say, from a privacy perspective, I might say, well, the purpose of this is connecting a customer with their digital assets. So yes, the purpose is correct. You should store it. That's okay. Thumbs up from the legal team. But now you might say, well, if we keep these two pieces of the credential together, then it becomes a honeypot for the bad guys. So this is where you're partnered with your security team. Maybe you segment that thing. Maybe part of this goes away and you do. So Abaxx, my new company, we have distributed identity. It may be that you only keep half of the credential and you have a distributed identity so that you're authenticating each and every transaction. That's another strategy. So this is where you can start to be more creative with how you're protecting things, making sure it's most efficient, making sure it's the most cost-effective thing. And you're still fulfilling that purpose of, is that customer connected to his or her data when they need it, how they need it? And have we contemplated, are there any pockets of natural harm? Are we collecting things that people are ignoring? I use the example a lot of events. So the marketing people are all excited. Christian, I want you to come to my event. We're going to stay in this fancy hotel. We're going to drink and party like Bacchanalia time. So I want to know your food references. I want to know what your flight numbers are. I want to know if you've got any status on any airlines. I'm going to put you in the hotel room. I want your credit card so I can hold the room. A lot of stuff. You're excited. I'm excited because we're going to party. And then the day after that event is over, guess who cares about that spreadsheet? Nobody but the bad guys. And yet, if you don't have a planned way of like sending it up in flames, you're going to create a backlog of what feels like really intimate marketing data that potentially really just need contact information and the fact that you were there, and maybe some narrative about what topics you're interested in. You don't need the flight information. You don't need the special credentials. You don't need your food allergy information. So understanding how to lift and separate, how to understand that data is alive. Data has a life cycle and a life story that it tells. This is when you're partnering together that you can get that kind of granularity because you're building in the capability to do so.
I appreciate you laying that out and the implications of that, and just a practical strategy to how to segregate the different data points and at an atomic level, as you say. You've worked with larger companies, mid-sized companies, smaller companies. From a privacy perspective, how have your approaches been similar and different between large, medium, and small?
Yeah, it's a great question. And in a lot of the legal stratas, they say until you make $25 million and the VCs will tell you, don't worry about privacy and security. I think that's total bunkum. When I'm working with really small entities, they're fighting for survival. Every employee matters, so they want to keep that data important. They're starting to invite their first vendors on board. So they have a list that's readable. When you get to the Ciscos and the Sun Microsystems and the Intels, you have 50,000, 60,000, 70,000, you have 165 countries. So if you're starting at that level, it's a massive, massive SWAT project of let's just get the most priority stuff. And then you kind of talk about legacy as if the data that's in your unstructured data sets is less volatile than your structured sets. No, it's just easier to manage your structured sets. If you start with very small companies, they just have a smaller universe. They also don't have as much expertise. They don't have as much budget. They don't have as much time. But the project is simpler. And those habits that they create as baby companies will make them very valuable as acquisition targets. I just got through with 6 months of due diligence selling my company. Let me tell
Only
you,
six
if you've got,
months?
yeah, I was a pretty small company. I had all my vendors are laid out, all my customers are laid out, all my contracts are laid out. It's a fairly straightforward, but still time invasive process. If your business is in owning and curating digital assets, and it
It
is
is. Every company's a
for
data company.
everyone, every company is a data company. If you want to be acquired, then you're going to have to show attestation of your capabilities. If you want to go public, you're going to have to show attestation of your capabilities. And waving a policy in front of the regulators, it ain't going to cut it. So start when you're a baby and it's easier, and you can hire people like us because we help you. And even if you're the biggest of the bigs, you're not a lost cause. We will go in and we'll just start with the priorities and we'll just knock this out in chunks. It's just like one bite of the elephant at a time. And I haven't yet seen one, except for senior leaders that don't want to get better. There are some business leaders that perniciously believe, what my old boss, Scott McNeely, said in 1999, you have zero privacy, get over it. I want to remind everyone that was a quarter of a century ago. We've moved on from there. We need to have privacy. It doesn't matter how big and rich you are. We need to have privacy, and we can absolutely make this work in an AI and quantum-based society.
Very well put, Michelle. And just as a follow-up question to that, and this is the last question with maybe a 1 minute or so window here. Looking at small companies, they're fighting for survival, like as you say, but it's less expensive, right, for them to do it. It's a lot simpler with that 2-person startup. How much of your time in the large organizations is spent dealing with silos and trying to break the silos down?
I would say it's become it's a feeling project. And the more technical the business is, the more feeling it is. People are scared that they've made mistakes and they're embarrassed. People don't want to share power or budget because that makes them feel bigger. So I spent a ton of time with the larger companies, breaking through the myths, breaking through the beliefs from last century that privacy's gone. And it's feelings. It's really more counseling, psychological counseling, than it is technology. The younger companies just kind of want to get down to it. It's like, what is this? What do I need to do to survive? What do I need to demonstrate? How do I get more customers to trust me? And so they are sort of confronted with the reality that this is like selling, if you're going to sell donuts, like, what's a quality donut look like? What are the ingredients? What are my food allergies? How am I going to get this to you fresh? Your data is your donut.
Your data is your donut. We're ending on that note from the jazz musician of data privacy, Michelle Dennedy. Thanks again for joining us, Michelle. And special thank you to our viewers and listeners as well, as always, for joining us and spending your time with us in this conversation today.
Thanks for joining us today on the Digital Trust Podcast. If you found this conversation helpful, please share it with someone you care about. And if you'd like to receive our monthly newsletter, please click the link in the description to subscribe. And to put your mind at ease, our newsletter will include episode summaries with key points and actionable takeaways, plus a heads up on the upcoming episode guests. Rest assured, it won't be a spammy sales message, and we will never sell or share your information. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you on the next episode.